Space race was a 20th century competition between two Cold War rivals, the US and the Soviet Union, to achieve superior spaceflight capabilities. Public interest in space travel originated in 1951 during the publication of Soviet Youth magazine and promptly picked up by the US magazine. And on July 30th, 1955, the competition was accelerated when the US announced its intent to launch an artificial satellite into space. The Soviet Union was so desperate not seem to be losing, and so with immediate effect, without anything tangible, they announced 4 days later that they too were going to launch their first artificial satellite into space in the near future. It took Soviet 2 years to remain true to their word, and on 4th October 1957, USSR launched their first artificial satellite into space. It was called Sputnik 1, and that caused the rise of the Sputnik crisis. The launch of Sputnik 1 caused public fear and anxiety among the Western nations due to the perceived technological gap between the USSR and the USA. Sputnik 1 was the world's first artificial satellite, and the Sputnik crisis was a very important and a significant event in history that triggered the creation of one and only NASA. The Soviet Union were not about to stop. Instead, they gained momentum when the USSR sent their first human into space with an orbital flight of Vostok 1 on the 12th of April 1961. These were followed by strings of other first achievements in space by Soviet Union over the next years. The US were not happy with the speed and the momentum of their competitor. So on the 5th of May 1961, John F. Kennedy, who was by then the US president, raised the stake of asking the US Congress to commit to the goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him back on the surface of the earth safely. And in 1969, with the flight of Apollo 11, history was made. The US landed the first human on the surface of the moon. This achievement alone overshadowed all the achievement that the Soviet Union has done before. The USSR responded by pursuing two crewed lunar programs with their N-1 rocket to land on the moon, but unfortunately they failed. So instead they decided to concentrate on their first space station program and the first time landing on Venus and Mars. Meanwhile, the US were landing 5 more Apollos on the surface of the moon, but robotically. The space race ended in 1972 when the two parties decided to work together to pursue space goals. It is not clear who won the race, but it is widely believed that the US won, majorly because they are the first people to manage to land a man on the moon and returning him back safely. During the period when the space race was so tight, both parties were desperate to achieve the unachievable. And unachievable could mean taking things too far. And that is what Soviet did. It was during then the Soviet engineer planned Sputnik 2, mostly after Premier Nikita Khrushchev requested a flight to coincide with November 7, 1957, the 40th anniversary of Russian Bolshevik Revolution. Sputnik 1 had made history, and a little bit of exaggeration will do wonders, and especially if that wonder was a bit out of expectation. So they needed Sputnik 2, and for Sputnik 2 to make history, Sputnik 2 needed a passenger, a living passenger. And of course, it was not going to be human. Human, according to human, are too precious for such a rescuing mission. And also, it needed to be something that matters. Also, something that no one cared about. Size 2 was something to be considered. So, a considerably small size was very perfect, but the size of a cat was too small. So, a week before Sputnik 2 was launched, the search for the passenger of Sputnik 2 was completed. This poor fellow was found wandering the street of Moscow. The Soviet scientists chose Moscow strays since they assumed that such animals had already learned to endure conditions of extreme cold and hunger. Her name was Laika. She was a 5 kg mongrel female, approximately 3 years old. She was named Laika after she barked during an interview. The bark was a happy bark. She thought that for the first time she has gotten a family, people who cared about her. Little did she know that she was a sacrifice that was going to change history forever. That those nice people who she thought they were family, they knew very well that she was not going to live to see her father's birthday. The journey she was about to take was a one-way ticket. It was very simple. Laika was not going to step on the surface of the earth again. Those who knew Laika described Laika as a quiet and a calm dog. Also, the very quality they needed for a very small cage that Laika was going to use as her last home and eventually a coffin. On Thursday of 3rd November 1957, a difficult message was received, which perhaps they understood very clearly. Sputnik 2 had been launched with a single crew member, a half-breed dog, a symbol of innocent martyr. Her name was Laika. When Sputnik 2 was launched, it was clear that nothing was going to save Laika, a black and a white dog with an innocent, curious face. A few hours after the launch, the temperature in Sputnik 2 raised to 40 degrees Celsius. Probably by then, Laika was in shock and terrified, not even able to wonder what she did to deserve such cruelty and such a harsh treatment from her newly found family that she thought she had found. Her pulse dropped, everything indicating a high level of stress. After 5 to 7 hours of struggles and fights, enduring extreme hot temperature and loud noises from the spacecraft, only Laika and Laika alone knew when she decided to surrender to her fate. Laika died within 7 hours after the launch. A hero, a martyr, an astronaut, and a sacrifice. Laika was lost. One more animal life. One more innocent life. One more out of human cruelty and madness. The protests were heard from all over the world, but that never changed anything. Most of the dogs of the time were named after Laika. Laika's body was never recovered as the ship was destroyed as it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. The only remaining reminder of Laika are statues of her, one of them being in the Star City in Russia, created in 1997. Laika is probably the most famous dog in the history of humanity and a clear picture of how dangerous and selfish human can be. Thanks for watching.